lot of what we think magic is fooling our eyes or our senses. But more, it's fooling how we perceive things, how we understand them. Cognitive illusions, logical fallacies, heuristics, and biases. That's part of what we're about to talk about with Dr. John Gabrieli. Since you missed the top secret portion of the show, I hope you enjoy the rest.
It would be sort of absurd to say that was a hard act to follow. And, you know, I just want to say two things. What an amazing Museum of Science program. And what an amazing... And what an amazing person Apollo is. Not only phenomenally skilled and talented, but also he's made real partnerships with neuroscientists and psychologists to discuss, you know, what is it that allows people to be fooled. And he's kind of on a social mission, which is to say, if we understand ourselves enough, we won't be fooled under circumstances where it might matter more than tonight.
Well, at least to believe that we can be. Because too many people, they are overconfident. And I think that stops them from perceiving. Because they think, that wouldn't happen to me. And they have this illusion of invulnerability.
Paul, can you say a word? You know, some of your magic is happening. You're so close to people. You're in their space.
Yes.
And how is that distracting them? Or how do you take advantage of how we feel about our personal space?
I think now, I've heard it called different things, proxemics in a personal space, but like, kind of like, I call it the force field. It's, and I can show you a little bit. Here, sir, would you mind standing up? I won't take anything from you yet. I'm off the clock. You've been eating different cereal than me, haven't you?
Right.
All right, please stand. Or maybe that's your microbes are different than mine. Stand over this way for me a little bit. Now, if you face me straight on, what's your name?
Greg.
Greg. So Greg, as I walk closer to you, it gets more and more uncomfortable for both of us. Yeah. But if I shift my weight, it's kind of more comfortable, but you can see as I shift in, it does that to you, yeah. So if I want to make him more comfortable, what I've learned is that if I break eye contact, now I'm just going to turn you a little bit this way so they can see your eyes too. So if I come into your space and I break eye contact and I share something with you, it feels more comfortable, yeah?
Right.
Yeah. But if I keep eye contact as I go into your space, feels weird all the way in, doesn't it? Yeah. Same thing, if I don't want you to focus here anymore, I can just look up at you, and that does that. You have a tendency to look up. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. So that's kind of for me, oh, she's playing that up there. So, yeah, that's it. So it's, for me, like that. I'm trying to use that against them and sometimes cut up their attentional pie, and that can be through what I say or also how close I am to them.
A thing you brought to my attention, and this is what's so cool about communicating with you, is this Dunning-Kruger effect. And it's basically this, for those of you, it sounds like it wouldn't be interesting. It's amazing. Basically, it's this idea that I learned from you pointing me to it, that we're very poor at knowing what we're good and bad at, and the worse we're at something, the better we think we are at it. And so, and you were pointing that, you know, that's a way in which sometimes we come to a conclusion about what's going on and don't take the next step to understand what's really going on. That
yes.
We get satisfied with an easy, comfortable answer, and the next thing we don't ask is that the correct answer? Is there something different going on?
But you have counter steps for that in science, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, that's how we get our paychecks. Yeah, we say,
well, because I think that's, again, so many of these things that is interesting to me is not because I'm trying to chase to become a scientist. It's because I want to learn how to think better. And I hope that becomes contagious. Because in this, like the Dunning-Kruger effect, from my understanding, what was interesting to me and how I stumbled on it was through my wife. She pointed out David Dunning, when he was researching, he heard about this guy robbing a bank. And when the guy robbed the bank, he was squinting and seemed to act like he was invisible. And upon later interviews, it turned out that this gentleman believed that if he rubbed lemon juice on his face, the video cameras couldn't see him. Turned out to be wrong. But he had tried his experiment at home. He squeezed the juice in his face. He couldn't quite see himself on camera, so he assumed it worked. And this was an exaggerated kind of demonstration, but Dunning was interested. And so what is this massive overconfidence? And I think what they're finding is that it's not as minor, it's not as rare as we would think, but so many of us have a very full cup. And we come to answers so quickly, and we like to check the box, got that, know that, next. And I like to push this idea. I say, ask new questions and question old answers, because no answer should be sacrosanct. If it's real, it should be able to be tested. And that's something that's very important to me.
I think another thing that you show beautifully in your magic, as well as in the videos you use, is what a small percent of the world we actually observe at a time, and how we fill in so much with our expectations, our beliefs, our guesses, our assumptions, and that the real signal from the world is often very tiny compared to what our estimations and heuristics think is out there.
Yes.
So and those are amazing. I saw people around me not putting their hands down as you were showing those pictures. And,
yeah.
And it almost creeps you out if you think about how much of our life might be like that. At this very moment, who knows what's going on out there, right? You know? Or around you, anywhere. Yeah.
When does the bracketing stop? I mean, I just recently heard a metaphor about politics and the media. That it's a lot like watching a 3-year-old soccer game. Follow this ball. Oh, let's follow this ball. Let's follow this ball. And we don't ever stop to ask, why are we playing the game, and where did all these balls come from? And I think that's a very interesting idea, because we usually are just looking at the players that they put up. Oh, this guy's bad, this guy's good, this guy's my hero. And we're not looking at why those people are being put in those positions, and if that's really what the issue is. And I think that a lot of issues get missed. And the more that we can think about opening and stepping back to 10,000 feet and looking at the bigger picture, the more important it is, especially now with media and memes that sometimes aren't necessarily true. We need to be able to think more critically. And all this data come in and is like mental cheese puffs. You know, it just makes our critical thinking soft and flabby if we don't exercise it.
Fantastic. If I can change gears for one moment, you kindly, generously volunteered to share a bit of information about yourself, and so which is that you would have a diagnosis of ADHD.
Yep.
And I mentioned this not to bother your private life, but
no,
you wanted to share this thought that we know so many people are touched with things like ADHD, with a variety of human abilities and patterns of strengths, and you know here. I mean, do you feel there's something about your attention and how it's displayed that makes you, difficult for some circumstances, but brilliant in this circumstance? Because, I think as the audience is coming in and you're going to pick your people and you have no machinery and it's all going to be, you never know how it's going to play out.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I'd freeze. I was telling my wife, I like my PowerPoint to be ready to go. And, the idea that I would make it all up with a very suspicious person in front of me. I mean, it just is like, so can you say a word about how strengths of different kinds, play out beautifully and so powerfully in this case? Yeah.
There's a few things. When I was younger, I learned to do what I did. I worked in an environment that I got to do it a lot. But I was curious about how I got to it. And it wasn't until about 4 years ago that I was trying to identify how I focus and how it's not multitasking, but it moves quickly back and forth. And I'm jumping inside people's mental sets, how they think about things. And I'm tracking multiple people at the same time when they're close. And I found out that some of this hyperfocus was actually a symptom of ADHD. And that was rather disconcerting to me at 37 years old. And I turned out to have off-the-charts ADHD. And I was told I have basically adult compensatory skills, which means I've taken the way that my mind processes and I've chosen to use it in the way that I do. So it kind of goes back to the free will. Was I doing this work because of that, or am I doing the work of my own accord? I don't know. But I think that what it is it's kind of a window of hope, that just because society labels these with different things, sometimes it's just a different way of processing. And you can taint that label as good or bad, or you can choose to use it for good or bad. And it's something that I've tried to do for myself in that way.
It's a encouragement to everybody who, so many families, so many people are touched with a label in some way or another. And I think you show beautifully how life is much, much more than that.
Well, thank you.
So sometimes we think a good reason to have cognitive biases is we're happier if we can fool ourselves, right?
Yes.
So study after study says that if we rate ourselves, we're above average on lots of things, right? And by the way, professors, 90% of us say that we're an above average teacher. So I can tell you that being a scientist or an academic does not make you any more modest or realistic. But it's also a source of it's also a sort of comfort, right? Because like if we're all thinking we're above average all the time, it's a happier way to be in some cases.
It's like a social lubricant?
Yeah. So you get up in the morning, you say, I'm above average, and today will be an above average day on top of there. So how do you, this is such a fascinating, you take advantage of these sort of chinks in our mental armor, these beliefs, heuristics, assumptions, and at the same time, we sort of navigate a lot of our life about that. So how do you see that balance between, truth-seeking and, kind of being happy?
And somewhere in between there's paranoia, isn't it? It's, because at what point do you stop digging? And like an example with that, like the theater model I was showing you a while ago, when you start asking questions about things, if I wanted to deceive you, I would give you an answer and then see if that is like throwing you a bone and see if you stop there. And a very literal example of this would be if I had killed someone and buried their body, and I knew that they might be using a canine unit to sweep that area, I could just bury them a little deeper, like 9 foot, and then bury a dog at 3 foot. So now when the canine unit comes through and does their job and they start digging, they find the dog and they believe that's what the canine unit is responding to, and they don't dig deeper. Now, I'm not saying that to encourage and give ideas to the sociopaths in the audience, but you can imagine now when you start to dig and they find the dog, what kind of paranoia would you have to say? Is like, I don't think that's what the dog responded to. I think there might be something underneath the dog. And it's really, that's the balance, I think. We have to choose how we're going to locate our attention, how we're going to locate our priorities. And the biggest thing, I think, is not that I hope that people will stop being able to be ultra-perceptive, but just to know that they're not that perceptive, to know that there's so much more that is underneath. And if you keep peeling that onion, you'll learn more, to be perpetual students of life, Can I ask a question or two of you? So for me, for a lot of you too, the reason why I'm here is to meet him. And I was excited. I asked to try to meet with you because I saw a lot of your research works in such an expansive area that encompasses this. And for me, it's been interesting kind of trying to understand about heuristics and biases. I didn't even know what those words meant coming from the Ozarks in Missouri. It's like biases and heuristics. I can kind of get the idea. That means prejudice, right? But the idea that they're like mental shortcuts. That we really are trying to process information. Can you kind of explain the difference for me between like heuristics and biases? Even start.
Well, so heuristics are, this is beautiful work from Kahneman and Tversky, and Kahneman won a Nobel Prize for it. It's just, we use lots of mental shortcuts all the time to come up with answers about things. And it turns out that if you did the full calculation, the full thing, and you thought it all the way through, we'd come up with quite a different answer if we did it algorithmically, which practically nobody does. And they've shown nicely that even if you take statisticians, they fall prey to these things. It's not a professional issue. It's a human nature issue. Mm-hmm. And then we take the shortcuts all the time, and the visual illusions kind of thing. And it's on the one hand, the shortcuts are useful because probably the time it would take for us to perceive things if we didn't have shortcuts would be devastating.
Yes.
On the other hand, when it comes to cognition, as you're pointing out, we often misinterpret information very, very easily. We misestimate things spectacularly under these kind of, because we make these shortcuts where we don't do the calculation, but we have an intuitive guess. And that's an area, for example, one of the many famous examples is if you make exactly the same decisions about a public health policy, but it's expressed in how many lives are saved, people love it. You say exactly the same number about how many people would die, people don't like it. They like saving lives, not losing lives, right? Even though it's the exact same numbers.
No, it's missing the rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah, the emotion of saving is good. The emotion of losing lives is bad, even though the numbers come out the same. So we do that all the time, and I think what you're doing is encouraging the public to think about that because there's people who want to convince us of various positions and things like that who know that very well.
Yeah.
And so it's fantastic, I think, what you do to make people think twice about easy assumptions.
So what is a bias, then, and how?
People use this term all over the place,
Yeah.
and just different terminology drives everybody crazy
Yeah.
in our field. But
I mean, does like a heuristic lead to a bias, or are they kind of different?
Heuristics are usually, the way we think about them, they're just short mental shortcuts of thought, but they're not particularly towards one thing or another. They're just the way we solve problems.
So it's like a bucket.
Yeah.
So it's like these things belong in this bucket. This belongs in this bucket.
Yeah, and biases, though, which we're all full of, all kinds. It shows all the time. Are where we have specific belief systems, where we think, oh, people are this way, or people, from the West Coast are this way, and the East Coast are that way.
Yeah.
And when we interpret then what they do, and as soon as they act the way we think the East Coaster is going to go, aha, I knew you'd wear a tie and jacket.
It's self-fulfilling in that way. Is that what confirmation bias is?
Yeah.
Kind of in that way.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it fulfills what I believe to be the case, and I'll see that. It's interesting because there's something in mind reading. With psychics throughout history, there's an area of magic called mentalism, and psychics use what's called cold reading, and they use terms that they trigger these, so that you'll believe, yeah, that's true. That is about me. This is how did you know that? And they really didn't give you any personal information, but you gravitated toward it. They told you what you would want to believe, and then you fill in this blank of what they actually told you,
yeah.
And it really becomes expansive. And it's I think that happens in politics a lot too.
Yeah. You just need a little bit of a cue, and then you're off and running, filling in your own beliefs and expectations. Yeah.
I was wondering if it would be okay if we open up the questions for you guys, so you can ask both John and I, and we'll try to tackle it back and forth. Do we have mics too for the audience? We do? Okay. So if you guys have any questions, just hold up your hand and kind of jump in. We got one?
Yep. First question back here.
Yes.
Hi. I actually suppose this question goes to both of you. Hi, my name is Ejin. Good evening. You were talking about personal space, and there was a slide about comfortable, personal. Do you see any difference in the range of this force field between rural and urban areas?
I see it for myself right now. I mean, not from a professional perspective, but I've seen it through cultures too, as well as rural. But even, for example, like with Japanese, sometimes they're used to be forced into a regular tight space, getting on like a subway or something like that. So their social zone is actually pretty tight. But then their personal, when there isn't that need to congregate in a tight space, kind of expands, and they want a little bit more of their intimate zone. And I say that at risk of when I do teaching for other groups, like let's say military that's going to go overseas. My wife and I do a lot of training in that area. I try to teach against these because it does kind of form biases that even though there are studies about, well, this culture will respond this way, or this culture might have more cognitive capacity, the danger of that is, how do you know about that individual? What is their family like? What's their unique perspectives? What if they were educated here and grew up here, especially in today's world, and it's hard to form an expectation of how their mind's going to work. So when you start to work with them individually, you kind of have to form a new baseline and start fresh, and try to kick out the biases and just maybe use them as a little shorthanded reference.
Yeah, but so just touching, I don't have an answer on the urban versus rural psychology in this, but one of the huge revolutions in our field is that the bulk of psychology has been built upon 18 to 20-year-olds attending research universities in the United States, Canada, and England. I mean, this is just, and there's a huge interest in really internationalizing our psychology and then, understanding that people from different cultural experiences, rural or urban, will have a different set of comforts and expectations, and I think that's a big area of research in psychology now, the diversity around the planet and how that plays out in terms of people's expectations and beliefs.
Other questions? Thought I heard a whisper.
Hi. I was wondering, have you ever been pickpocketed? And if so, how long did it take you to figure it out?
I believe that's to you, John.
No, not now.
Not now or not yet.
I'll tell you, I remember when I was a teenager, I was pickpocketed in London on the Underground, and it wasn't until I got back to my hotel, quite a bit afterwards, I realized it was gone. That's the only time I remember.
For me, I completely believe that I can be. But it's I go and I try to find people to steal from me. So when I'm traveling internationally, I'll try to set myself up to be stolen from, so I get to meet people. So I have been stolen from. Is it in the way that you mean? I haven't been stolen from in that way. I've been robbed at gunpoint, and I've had things like that happen, but I haven't been passively. Although when I do presentations or shows, I mean, it's something that everybody loves to try to steal my pocket scarf and all those kinds of things, and that happens all the time.
Next question here.
Yes?
What is the largest or most clumsy, awkward thing that you managed to lift off of someone? You know, like wallets and keys are kind of small, but did you ever like take someone's belt or something like that?
Yeah, I do belts. Yes. And now the clumsiness becomes the individual and my own clumsiness at that point. The hardest thing for me to take, I'll frame your question a little bit differently. The hardest thing for me to take is glasses while they're wearing them, and not the ones I took here. These were in pockets, so that's like 2 points. But taking them off someone's face while they're wearing them means that I change the way they perceive things. And I have to recognize if they're chasing me enough for me to take the glasses off, which I was trying to do here, didn't really find it. And as I do it, this is something I'd like to ask you about, because I have a theory of why it works. I asked them a question like I did for you. I kind of barraged you with a few statements like, stand with your feet closer to the ground, stand the same distance from me, and you're like, sure, I'll do that. And like you just are married and you follow directions well. And when I'm asking those, it is kind of to create this confusion, kind of a bafflement. And when I'm doing it to someone with glasses, I try to say something that's a bigger priority. So that American Express you had in your wallet was a so-and-so. And if I hit that right, you can see, I always call it a little security guard in the head. I call him Frank. And he's supposed to be watching all your perceptive tools and high-def cameras. And suddenly he says, wait, let's stop and rewind the tape. So Frank turns around at the desk, starts looking through the file, saying, when did he steal my American Express? And even though the eyes are looking or they're still feeling, they don't prioritize it because they're too busy processing this information, and I'm able to take the glasses off. And it's, to me, still a fascinating thing because they can't see the same as what they did. And I have to kind of try not to look at them like this, like, hello, are you not really seeing me? And I become very aware when I am wearing the glasses and I talk to them, and I say, so are you missing anything? And there's a neat moment for me where it's just, they'll either, I say, how about these? And I give them the glasses. Then they say, oh, yeah, my glasses, which means that they encoded the memory and then went on to the next thing and didn't think it relevant. Or they say, when did you touch my face? Which means they forgot me holding on to the side of their head. They didn't even think it was relevant. And that, to me, is a huge distinction of, is there some way that you can say a non sequitur unusual statement, and as somebody starts to have a recognition of somebody's touching my head, and then you shoot it like an arrow past that and say, stop, reset, this isn't relevant, and they don't encode the memory. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of this type of...
Well, we do know that where you allocate your attention can be amazing. And just to pick one neuroscience finding now, there's so much evidence that there's certain parts of our brain that are turned on when we're inwardly focused. And there's other parts of our brain that turn on when we're monitoring our environment. What do we see? What do we touch? And those toggle back and forth constantly. And so when you get them, I guess, thinking like, my American Express card, and now what's going to be involved in, canceling all the things I charge on it. Right?
Yeah. I want them to think about that picture.
Yeah. And it's all of a sudden you're in the crisis of a charge card that has to be replaced. It's not going to work tomorrow when I get on the airplane. You're driving all these memories and internal feelings, and all of a sudden the outer world is disappearing. I guess even their sense of touch of their glass frames. So.
Do you mind if I try something like that here? Is that okay? This isn't something I normally do, but if you don't mind, this is kind of a neat effect. Whoops, kind of hooked on my mic. There's the idea of understanding somebody's mental state, of getting them to focus internally. Have you ever heard the Q test of drawing a Q on your forehead?
No.
Can you guys try that with your first finger? Just put it up to your forehead and draw a capital letter Q. That's an interesting idea. You either drew the Q so I could see it, or you drew the Q on the other way so you could see it. So it's almost, are you thinking from your perspective or from mine? So almost like this impression management. It's kind of a neat thing to play with what you're doing at the moment. Doesn't mean you're always like that you're focused internally or externally, but it shows in this moment. And this is an effect that I'll try with somebody here, and it's not something I do regularly, but it really happens only inside their head. So you guys get to stand backstage and watch and try to imagine what this effect is to them. Ma'am, right there with the scarf around your neck. Hi, what's your name? Jill? Jill. Hi, Jill. Nice to meet you. Pleasure. So, Jill, if you don't mind, can I try this with you?
Sure.
Have you ever seen me before tonight?
Just on YouTube.
Oh, on YouTube. Okay. YouTube doesn't count. You can't believe the things you see on YouTube. Would you like to take off that scarf? Because I would hate for that to distract you. That's great. And if there's anybody that we should give that to. Now, I'm going to test your perception. Oh, that's okay. That's all right. Just later on, you'd think that I took this, so I wouldn't want that to happen. Hi. Can you keep an eye on this? Do you trust this guy? Okay, great. All right. Now, Jill, close your eyes for a second for me. Now, great, perfect. Just wanted to see if you were really closing them. Because this, in order for this to work, the only way, let's step over this way so we're not hiding John in the background. The only way that this will work is if when I say close your eyes, you really do close your eyes. Otherwise, the illusion won't work, and then we just stop, we pack the bags, we go home. So again, try again, close your eyes. Great. And just face forward just a little bit right there. Now, no matter what you hear, just keep your eyes closed. And I'm going to ask you to see if you can tell the difference between what you saw before and what you're seeing now. Okay, open your eyes.
Yep.
It's kind of obvious, yeah? Okay, all right. So let's try this. This is interesting because it's just a hanger, kind of something you would be familiar with. But what's important for you is to make a mental map of that right now, how it works. Meaning it doesn't have magnets, it doesn't open up, it's kind of actually epoxied together really tight. Now that you have that mental map, I want you to just use your hands and hold them in front of you, right towards me. Got it? Now they're aware of things that you aren't as they're watching this whole thing. That's okay, it's just going to be a little bit of fun. I'm going to pull your sleeves up so you have full sensory of this. And now, can you feel me touching your skin? But you can also see it, so you can kind of see which area. Bring your hands just a little bit together, and then I want you to go ahead and close your eyes now. Keep them very tightly closed. So as you're keeping the eyes closed, I want you to remember where my hands are as I do this. I'm going to move them to your palms of your hand. Okay, so you're keeping track there. Now, as I go through here, try to imagine in your head where my wrists are. Then rotate your hands up and grab hold of my wrists. Perfect, great. Now go and hold on fairly firm, but give me a little slack on this one. As I reach up, go ahead. Hold on to it tight. As I reach up and I grab hold of the hanger, I'll remove it over my neck. And now I'm going to touch it against your arm. It's going to be a little bit cold. You'll feel it here. Now here. It's interesting. Can you see the effect in her head? Now I'm going to try to drop it through your arm. Open your eyes. Interesting, isn't it? That's okay. Hide your enthusiasm. You're doing very well. That's okay. So this is interesting. You can see again, it somehow went through your arm, and it's because you kind of blocked one of your senses. So try it again. Squeeze kind of firm. You got it? Mm-hmm. All right. Same thing. Kind of close your eyes again. Now you know where your hand is because your proprioception lets you know where your hand is in space. I want you to do the same thing. Put your other hand up here, kind of like you're praying. Hold on to your hands with each other, but separate your elbows from each other just a little bit so you got some space. I'm going to try to pull this towards me, and as I do, just let it come out through your fingers and then close your hands again. So as I pull it close to me, there you go. Close your fingers again, very tight. Okay, now I'm going to do this very slowly. Now it's going to touch your forehead, so don't be surprised when you feel a little bit of cold. But can you feel that? Okay, so you felt that, and now I'm going to touch it against your arm. And now, right through your arms again. Open your eyes. Kind of cool, huh? It becomes more and more complicated, doesn't it? So, go ahead, open it up. You can take it off there. Go ahead and tug at it, but turn this way so they can see your face. Because right now, you're very charming in the way you express your surprise, but it's hidden in the shadow under your bangs there. So we're going to try this again, but I'm going to try to put this through your arm again, but I want you to make a solid flesh loop. Put your hand on your head. So I'm going to try to put it there around your arm. There's two ways. I can either break your arm or take your head off. But I'm going to try to put it on there, okay? Same thing, face towards them. And now, go ahead and close your eyes again. Now, there should be no way for me to do this, yeah? Yeah, I'm going to try it as best as I can. It's kind of fun. Open your eyes. Isn't that crazy? You lifted it up a little bit, yes. Yeah, my mic is a little bit different there. You've got onto it, though, didn't you? All right, go ahead and put it there. Yeah, I'll help you with that.
Okay.
Here, go ahead and put it up there really tight, okay? Good.
Put this here?
Yep.
Yeah.
Not so much that you're pulling your hair, but just that you're there, okay? Great. Just put it all the way. Close your eyes all the way again. Now, you said that you saw something, so I want you to use your other hand, too. Go ahead and hold your other hand all the way out to your side. I would say that these are lovely bracelets, though. Now, what I'd like for you to do is just put this hand on your waist, just like that. That's perfect. Now, I'm going to try to take this one out from here. And pardon my reach as I reach around the front of you. You can feel me touching it here. You can feel me pulling it across, touching your head, touching your neck. And this time, I'm just going to touch the back of your arm right there. You can feel that. And now also right here. And it should go right through. Isn't that crazy? It's kind of fun, isn't it? Give her another round of applause. Thank you so much. So I think that that's kind of fun because that affects literally, I mean, I don't get to do that in normal shows, so I thought here is kind of perfect because it's only happening in your head. It's kind of you interpreting the information that happens. Yeah.
Okay, another question?
Hi. So can you give some heuristics on when do you dig and when you don't dig? And, you know, kind of the related question is, well, what if you're digging and you're digging because it's a misdirection?
So in this case, we're using digging metaphorically, not just for the example of the dog. But we could say peeling onions, or when do you do these? That was the thing that I think is interesting. It's a question because at a point, if you're always asking the questions, does it become paranoia? That you're not satisfied with what you see. But I think the problem is, for me, when someone asks, how can I be more perceptive? Which I kind of think is the synergy between the two things that you just said. If they walk into an environment and they try to mnemonically remember things that they see or wherever it may be, it would be rather hard to do that because they have no relevance. But if you start to ask why did they choose this floor? Why is that wood, or is it a veneer? Is that just a vinyl sticker? Because I see little scratches right there. So all those things now make me have a very concrete version of reality. But now, how many things am I going to ask questions about? That's affected by my priorities. So why am I here when I walk into the space? Am I law enforcement exploring this underground meth house? Or my dad, I'm looking at this space saying, is this place safe for them to babysit my kid? Do they have the light sockets plugged? So literally, our own experience at that moment becomes the filters with which we use different heuristics. So it changes that because that dad could be the same cop, he's just off duty. So it makes him put on his cop hat and start to use that. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, in psychology, I don't know if it's just because we like to make fun of people, but it's just amazing how people don't dig. So I understand that being too skeptical leads to paranoia. But, you know, the example after example, just to give one famous one of the work at Harvard on thin slices, where they show for just a few seconds a grainy, silent video of a teaching assistant. And people rate how much they think they would like to have that teaching assistant for a course. And that 6 seconds of a grainy, silent video correlates incredibly highly with the actual end of semester ratings of students for the teaching assistant. Does that make sense?
So it's like a placebo?
It's a first impression and the reason why that first impression is so amazingly accurate is it seems like when people have that first impression, then everything fills in after that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, like once you decide this thing looks like a nice teacher, so I warn my teaching assistants that first 15 seconds of your course be awesome because they'll love you. But you know, it's amazing that an entire semester of experience with a teacher is almost perfectly predicted by your first 15 seconds impression of that teacher. And it's not because you're so brilliant in 15 seconds, it's because once you have the thin idea, you don't tend to dig deeper. And people have a lot of pressures. We have a lot of things to balance and juggle and think about. So, but it's rare that we, dig and with any depth at all.
So this term "thin idea," I've heard you say a couple
Thin
times.
slices, yeah.
That's a thing?
Yeah, thin slices. Yeah, this first impression
See,
formation.
that's how I learned.
You know, and that first impression, of course, is going to be hugely influenced by people who seem like they're like you. People who remind you of people who you know. So all the biases go into the first impression, and then people so powerfully line up everything they see after that to fit with that first impression.
So for you, when I'm processing this, I'm picturing salami, and it's like if I tried to eat the salami all at once, I would gag. But in thin little slices, I could constantly eat as much as I wanted to consume, and I could perceive and become.
Yes, yeah, because you're done. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
You I like, you I don't like, you I'll marry, I mean, it's a boom, boom,
A few
boom,
more
boom.
slices
Yeah,
there
yeah,
on the
yeah.
marriage thing, right? Yeah.
My wife is here too.
Any other questions?
Next question here.
This is a question for both of you. I think we live in an age of thin slices. We have a lot of impression that we know a lot of things because the access to the information is available, and this access to information is confused a lot with knowledge. Do you think that you mentioned overconfidence before, and in full disclosure, I'm married to Apollo.
I thought that sounded familiar to me. I was like, I've heard this question daily.
Apollo and I talk a lot about curiosity. So a question for you, John. Do you think that there's an inverse relationship between curiosity and overconfidence? And are there any studies that you're aware of on that? And the question for you, Apollo, is that do you think that we need to be fooled to be more curious?
Miyagi says yes.
I'm not aware of any actual research on that, but I think it's a great question, which is, is the reason we stop thinking about things or understanding a person so quickly that our curiosity gets fully satisfied, and it's a curiosity that would let us dig deeper and think further than we do. I think it's a great question.
Well, it's also kind of expansive. I think what you're also saying too is because we have the internet or a phone in our pocket, we assume that we have this Encyclopedia Britannica that we've consumed just because we have proximity to it. So is that almost like a way that culturally we're suffering from the Dunning-Kruger, that now because I think I have access to the information, I think that I know it, and I think I have the wisdom and the experience that comes with that, so I feel overconfident just because I have this smartphone in my pocket.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very dangerous thing. In response to your question to me, Ava asked if fooling could be perhaps. My goal when I try to fool people is to empty their cup. I want them to know that they don't know so that they try to learn. And it's one way to do that without triggering their ego is to let them know, okay, I don't know this, maybe I don't know other things. I do want to say in this that Ava is my partner in crime. She's my true partner in crime. And we've been working together for 10 years. And prior to meeting her 10 years ago, I really just was interested in cons, how people lie, still do. But she had me read the news. She had me learn that there's people that run for president every year, or every 4 years, that's right? She showed me that if I watch the debates, I'm going to see the same thing as I do with cons. And a lot of the reason why I'm here right now is because she had studied psychobiology. She acts as my Clef Notes. And as you heard, that's where the smart questions come from. And I say them in the hillbilly way of saying it. So thank you, Ava. I know that our time is kind of running low, and I have a few things to give back to you guys. So I'd like to return those to you, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time to talk to everyone.